friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by Books and Jams. It is time to do a wrap up of my last round of 5-star predictions. In December, I talked about all 5 of these books and I predicted that they would be 5 stars for me. So we're going to go through each one and take a look and see if I did end up giving it 5 stars or not. But first of all, I want to take a moment to talk about my favorite subscription service that I have been a subscriber to for many years, and they are also the sponsor of this video. Thank you so much to Book of the Month. I love Book of the Month so much, and I'm just going to take a minute to tell you about it. Book of the Month is a long-lasting, a long-running subscription service where each month their team vets tons and tons of new releases from new authors, debut authors, emerging authors. So you don't have to do the research of what's coming out if you don't want to. Book of the Month does all that work for you. They choose 5 to 7 books, and then you get to pick which book that you want sent to you each month. That's something that I love about it. I'm not getting a surprise book. I know what I'm getting. And if I don't want any of their selections, I can just skip the month, which is also fantastic. So you know how expensive hardcover books can be. With Book of the Month, you're getting a fantastic deal on a fantastic book. One of their goals is to really help readers find the books that are right for them. And so they offer a variety of genres: nonfiction, fiction, thriller, historical, romance, contemporary, literary. They have a little bit of everything. So even if you don't like the books this month, you'll find something next month that you love. And this month in May, you can use the code GOMAY to get your first box for just $9.99. A hardcover, new release book for $9.99. You can't get better than that. This month, there are 6 selections. Oh man, I just love how they look lined up with the little Book of the Month coin on the ends there. So let me tell you about May's 6 selections. First off is Breathless by Amy McCulloch. This is a thriller. It's about a mountaineering expedition gone wrong. It feels like it would be a perfect wintry read. We have The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. For those of you who love gothic fiction or a haunted house story, this would be a good choice for you. This next one is for those of you who love a literary fiction. It is Yerba Buena by Nina LaCour. This is about 2 women finding home. I do believe that there is some marriage issues in here, and one of the women works as a flower arranger for a fancy restaurant. Part of Your World is for all of my romance-loving friends. I am sure Abby Jimenez is a name that you know. This small-town romance is sure to have you swooning as you read. Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez is the next option, and this one takes place in post-segregation Alabama, and we follow a passionate nurse who really wants justice for the girls that are in her care. And finally, for my fantasy-loving friends, Darling Girl by Liz Mikulski is kind of a retelling of Peter Pan, where one woman has to take on the infamous Peter Pan to save her daughter. All of these choices are so great. I love that there's a fantasy, a historical fiction, a literary fiction, a thriller, a gothic fiction, a contemporary. Like, we have a little bit of everything. But in addition to the choices that they make every month, there are a selection of add-ons, if you will, where you can add a book to your box for a discounted price. And one of the choices for add-ons in May is Book of Night by Holly Black. The back of this says, "Even your shadow can be stolen." Dun, dun, dun. So I just love that there is such a variety each month of different genres. They are really doing the work for you to help you find some new releases. In case you haven't guessed, the one that is my top pick for May is definitely Take My Hand. I love a good historical. So once again, if you're interested in trying out Book of the Month for May, use the code GOMAY and your first box will be just $9.99. A hardcover book for $9.99. I hope that you take a look at Book of the Month, and thank you so much, Book of the Month, for sponsoring this video. I really appreciate it. And I'm so excited to start reading these books. Now, I did read some books that I thought would be 5 stars. The 5 books that I chose in December were Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger, The Lost Man by Jane Harper, What the Wind Knows by Amy Harmon, A Place to Hang the Moon by Kate Albus, the only middle grade in this stack, and Codename Helene by Ariel Lahan. I'm really pleased that it did not take me a full year to get around to these books. I wish it were even a little shorter. My goal was by the end of March. I didn't quite make that, but I got pretty close. Here we are, May. And I need to tell you, I did really good. I did really good with this stack. Let's go through them one by one. I will start with Codename Helene by Ariel Lahan. I read this at the beginning of February, which in retrospect probably wasn't the best time to read this book. At that point in my world, outside of reading, my brother was in the hospital and was very sick. At the beginning of February, when I read this, he was in the ICU and was sedated and intubated. And Things were very precarious. Not the best time to read a historical fiction that is pretty heavy and has some sad moments and was a little bit complicated. Like, it just wasn't the best time to read this book. And I think that did affect my rating. I think I gave it a generous 4 stars. That's not a great reflection of how I felt at the end of it, because it really wasn't the best time for me. But I can recognize that this was a very well-written book. And if I had read it in another time, it's possible it would have been 5 stars. But in this book, we follow a young woman who is a spy during World War II. She's not exactly a spy. She's kind of a go-between between resistance groups in France during World War II and resources in England. She has a lot of power and responsibility with these French resistance groups. They are dependent on her to get them the supplies that they need. It's very interesting because when we see her with these French resistance groups, she's very powerful and confident and very well-spoken, incredibly smart and clever. But then we get these flashbacks to 1936, which isn't that many years before, where she's kind of a young journalist. Nancy Wake is her name. That's who we're following. That's her real name. Her codename is Helene. Nancy Wake. We get to see Nancy as she first moves to Paris and her innocence and her love story as she meets Henri and as their relationship develops. But then we flash forward and back. We kind of go back and forth to the time when she is this powerful, smart, resilient woman with a lot of responsibility. And it's almost like it's 2 different people. Like, how did this innocent, naive young woman become this strong, clever, very capable leader, spy, resource? I don't know what her title would be. She did have code names. She had to be quick on her feet. She was a fighter, and she just was a really remarkable woman. There were aspects of her personality that transferred: her sense of humor, her quick wit, that we could see in both of the timelines. But it was very interesting to see how she became the woman that she did. Her life was pretty remarkable. I really did enjoy this. I liked the going back and forth. I liked seeing the story developed. I loved the love story with her and Henri and their relationship with each other and his respect for her and the way that they just treated each other. There was so much to love about this book. It just wasn't the right time. So for me, it got 4 stars rather than 5. At the very beginning of the year, I read Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger. I buddy read this with Lindsay, one of my subscribers, and I loved it. I did give this one 5 stars. It is the story of a young boy in Minnesota in 1961, and it takes place during the course of one summer. And it's this boy and his little brother and the events of the summer. So right at the beginning of the summer, there are a couple of deaths that happen, and it's summertime. So this boy's kind of running all over. His dad is a pastor, and I loved the father figure in here. The dad and the mom don't really get along very well. There's some characters in here that you just kind of love to hate. The boys get up to some mischief that has some pretty big consequences. And then there is a death that happens that rocks their world, and the boys get very involved with trying to figure that out. And I really love William Kent Kruger's writing so much. I loved this Tender Land, and I love this one. I'm very curious to read his mystery series and see how that writing translates into a mystery. I mean, there's a level of mystery in here as well, but there were so many little one-liners. There are so many quotes that I pulled out. I loved how this Ordinary Grace theme was woven through the story. I did not love this 11-year-old's potty mouth. There was a bit of language in here, and it eventually I kind of glazed over it, but it was jarring at the beginning, in particular because he does take God's name in vain quite a lot. Uses it as a curse, and I just don't really love that at all. So that was not very fun. But I still gave it 5 stars because the writing was spectacular. So for me, this Tender Land story and plot I liked a little better than this one, but the writing in here really just carried this book and made it a 5-star read. So absolutely, William Kent Kruger is one of my favorites. And I don't even have a connection to the Midwest. He writes these books Both of his books take place in the Midwest, and I've never even been there. Also in February, I think, right before reading Codename Helene, I read What the Wind Knows by Amy Harmon, who is a favorite of mine, and this was 5 stars as well. I really loved this book. This one does have an element of time travel that was very interesting. In this one, we start out with Anne and her grandfather, and they have a very close and special relationship. And Anne particularly loves hearing her grandpa's stories about Ireland. She has done a lot of travel, but she had never actually been to Ireland. Always kind of hoping, I think, that she and her grandfather would go together. But then her grandfather passes away and asks her to take his ashes to this particular lake in Ireland. And while she is doing that, there's some time travel that happens. And she is taken back to 1921. Ireland is kind of on the brink of a war, wanting to separate themselves from England, and there's a lot of conflict and a lot of political stuff in here. That was just really interesting. Honestly, it's not a time period that I was super familiar with. It definitely made me want to read more books set in Ireland. When she goes to the past, she finds herself under the care of a doctor, Dr. Thomas Smith, and ends up being the guardian of this young boy who she immediately feels a special bond with. So there's a little bit of a romance that happens, and there are some twisty turnies that some were foreseeable, like I could see some happening, but others I was surprised by. And I really love Amy Harmon, and I love that this was so different from the other two that I had read previously to this, from Sand and Ash and Where the Lost Wander. This one was completely different from both of those. Still historical, but a totally different part of the world. It is also connected to her personal history. The town that is talked about in Ireland is where Amy Harmon's great grandfather is from. So I love that personal connection to the story as well. Yeah, definitely 5 stars. This solidified the fact that Amy Harmon was a favorite author for me, 100%. I should have done these in the order of when I read them, but also in January, I read A Place to Hang the Moon by Kate Albus. This is a lovely, lovely story. Definitely checks boxes for me. It's set during World War II. It's a middle grade historical fiction about a sibling group. I just love sibling group stories, in particular in middle grade books. So in this book, we have 2 brothers and their sister who at the beginning, their grandmother, guardian, passes away and leaves them a rather large inheritance. But there are no other family members. And it's at the time when children were being sent out of London because of the Blitz. To keep them safe in the beginning of World War II, lots of children were sent to the countryside. So their lawyer comes up with this plan. Why don't we take this as an opportunity for you to choose a family? And don't tell them about the inheritance, because we don't want that to be the reason that they want to keep you. So he kind of sends these kids crazy. He sends these kids on a mission to find a family. So they go out to the countryside. They get placed with a couple different families. Both are not the greatest. They find solace at the library in their town, and they really make a connection with the librarian, who herself is not really accepted by the people around her in the town. You kind of find out why. And you just follow these siblings and this librarian and their journey together. And it was lovely and sweet. It wasn't quite as gritty as The War That Saved My Life, which is also about kids being sent out of London to the countryside during World War II. So it's not quite as gritty or hard hitting as The War That Saved My Life, but it was still very, very much enjoyable and lovable. And I loved the focus on books. The librarian and all 3 kids read different types of books. And so that was really fun to see where their interests lie in that respect. But I just absolutely love this book, and I gave it 5 stars. Yay. And finally, the book that I just read not that long ago is The Lost Man by Jane Harper. This is a totally different type of book than all the others. This one is a mystery set in the outback in Australia. And I also gave this one 5 stars. This is my 3rd Jane Harper, and I just love her. I love her books so much. It's set in the heat of winter. Australia is in the southern hemisphere, so it's the opposite, right? So it's Christmas time, very, very, very hot. And everything is super spread out in the outback. So we follow this family, 2 brothers who have like ranch lands right near each other, but nothing is really near each other. A helicopter that's driving over or something discovers a brother. There are 3 brothers. One of the brothers is found dead, kind of in the middle of the land out in the outback near some tree. His car is not right near him. It's kind of far away, walking distance, but not super close. How did he get out to this tree? What happened to him? There's a big old mystery surrounding this event. It's kind of not a closed room, but there's a limited number of suspects because they're so far isolated in the outback. And that adds to the suspense, and the heat, the setting just all adds to the suspense of this story. And then we start to get to know Cam, the man who died. We get to know his wife and his kids, the mom of these 3 boys, the ranch hand who was kind of like good friends with the mom. We learn what happened with the dad, who is no longer, who passed away a number of years ago. The one brother who is the youngest kind of feels like he gets passed over. The older brother has had some kind of altercation in town and is no longer welcome. And we learn about all of these different characters and a bit of their backstory, and they all in a way become suspects, which I love. And I was so surprised by the ending. So surprised. It was not something that I was expecting at all. And I loved it. I love the feeling that I get when I read Jane Harper's books. I love that intensity, that isolation. Like, I love how the setting plays such a huge role in her stories. In all 3 that I read, a little bit different from each other, but still the setting just plays such a big role. And I love that. So yay, Jane Harper, 5 stars. 4 of my 5 picks were 5 stars, and the other one was 4 stars. Maybe would have been 5 stars if I read it at a different time. I would definitely call that a win, if you ask me. So that is my 5-star prediction wrap up. I am so excited now to go through my shelves and pick a few more to do in a little while, but I would love to hear from you. Do you agree with me on any of these books? Have you read them? Are you now eager to pick them up yourself? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I love chatting with you in the comments and connecting with you down there. I really appreciate Book of the Month for sponsoring this video and you for watching it. You guys are why I'm still here. I appreciate you spending a few minutes with me today, and I look forward to talking with you in another video very soon. Bye.